My business partner cornered me in the boardroom in front of 12 shareholders, pointed at the door, and said, "Robert, you're finished here. Your outdated methods are killing this company." I walked out carrying nothing but my leather briefcase and my dignity. What Mark didn't know was that I still owned 51% of the shares he thought he'd already stolen, and the company he believed was his was worth $14 million that I was about to sell to his biggest competitor. Before I continue, if you appreciate stories about standing up for yourself and taking back what's yours, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We share new stories every day about people who refuse to be defeated. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what province or city you're watching from. My name is Robert Chen. I'm 62 years old, and I spent 18 years building Accutech solutions, from a two-person operation in a cramped Vancouver office to a company with 47 employees and clients across Canada. But on October 15th, 2024, everything I'd worked for nearly disappeared in a single afternoon. I was sitting in our boardroom on the 20th floor of our downtown Vancouver office tower. The view of the harbor and mountains usually calmed me, but that day, all I could see were the faces of 12 shareholders, arranged around the table like a jury. Mark Sullivan, my business partner of 15 years, stood at the head of the table with a PowerPoint presentation glowing behind him. "Gentlemen," Mark began, deliberately ignoring our 3 female board members, "we've reached a critical juncture. The market is demanding innovation, speed, and modern thinking. Unfortunately, our current leadership structure is holding us back." He clicked to the next slide. My photograph appeared alongside a list of what he called strategic failures. Every decision I'd made in the past 2 years was reframed as incompetence. The cautious expansion I'd recommended became resistance to growth. The thorough client vetting process I'd implemented became bureaucratic red tape, slowing our sales pipeline. Robert's approach worked 15 years ago, Mark continued, his voice taking on a patronizing tone I'd never heard before. But this is 2024. We need leadership that understands cryptocurrency integration, AI-driven automation, and cloud-first architecture. Robert still prints emails, for God's sake. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the room. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the table. My wife, Catherine, had died just 8 months earlier from ovarian cancer. The grief was still a heavy coat I wore every day. Mark knew this. He'd attended her funeral, shaken my hand, told me to take all the time I needed. "Mark," I said quietly, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No, Robert, that's exactly the problem." He turned to address the board directly. He wants to handle everything in private, behind closed doors, the old-fashioned way. But we're a modern company. We need transparency, accountability, and frankly, we need leadership that can take us into the next decade. He clicked again. A restructuring proposal appeared on screen. The words, "Mandatory retirement, age 62, were highlighted in red. "I'm proposing," Mark said, "that Robert transition into a consulting role. We'll buy out his shares at a fair market value. He'll receive a generous severance package, and we'll all move forward." My blood went cold. This wasn't a proposal. It was an ambush. "The share price you're suggesting," I said, keeping my voice level, "is $4 per share. The company is worth significantly more than that valuation implies." "Based on outdated assessments," Mark shot back. "I've had 3 independent firms evaluate our worth. Given our declining market position, aging infrastructure, and leadership uncertainty, $4 is generous." I looked around the table. These were people I'd worked with for years. Jennifer Park, who I'd personally recruited from IBM. David Thornton, whose niece I'd given a summer internship. Raj Patel, who I'd mentored through his CPA certification. Not one of them would meet my eyes. "May I see these independent evaluations?" I asked. "They're confidential," Mark replied smoothly. "But I assure you, they're thorough and accurate." That's when I understood. This wasn't about my age or my methods. This was about Mark wanting complete control without the inconvenience of a partner who still held majority shares. I stood up slowly. Every eye in the room finally turned to me. "Gentlemen and ladies," I said. "I appreciate your time today. I'll need to review this proposal with my legal counsel before making any decisions. Mark, let's schedule a meeting for next week to discuss the details privately." Mark's jaw tightened. He'd expected me to fight back, or, better yet for him, to crumble. Instead, I was remaining calm and professional. "There's nothing to discuss," he said sharply. "The board has voted. This transition is happening whether you agree or not." "Actually," I replied, "you'll find that any significant structural changes require approval from shareholders holding more than 50% of voting shares. I still hold 51%, Mark. You cannot remove me without my consent." His face flushed red. "You're forgetting the clause in our partnership agreement. In cases of incompetence or inability to perform duties, the board can intervene." "And you're forgetting," I said, picking up my briefcase, "that such a determination requires legal proceedings, not a PowerPoint presentation and a show of hands." I walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, Mark called out, "Robert, don't make this difficult. You're finished here. Your outdated methods are killing this company. Take the severance, retire gracefully, and let us save what you've spent too long destroying." The room was silent. I turned back one last time. "I'll see you next week, Mark. Have your lawyer present." I left without another word. In the elevator descending from the 20th floor, my hands finally started shaking. I'd just been publicly humiliated by a man I'd trusted for 15 years. In front of a board I'd assembled myself. The company I'd built from nothing was being stolen in broad daylight. But here's what Mark didn't know, what none of them knew. 6 weeks earlier, Catherine had been in hospice care. In those final lucid days, she'd called our family lawyer, Patricia Morrison, to her bedside. Catherine was a corporate attorney herself before her illness, and she'd spent her career reading people like stock reports. "Patricia," Catherine had whispered while I was out getting coffee, "you need to audit the company. Robert trusts Mark completely, but I don't. Something about how he's been acting since I got sick. Too helpful, too interested in the financials. Too many questions about succession planning." Patricia had followed Catherine's instinct. She'd quietly hired a forensic accountant named James Wu, and what James discovered would turn out to be the key to everything. That evening, in my empty house in West Vancouver, I sat at the kitchen table where Catherine and I had shared thousands of meals over 34 years of marriage. Her reading glasses were still on the counter, her coffee mug still in the cupboard. I hadn't been able to move anything yet. I opened my laptop and accessed the encrypted files Patricia had sent me 2 weeks after Catherine's funeral. Files I'd been too grief-stricken to fully review until now. James Wu's forensic report was devastating. Over the past 14 months, Mark had been systematically preparing to push me out. He'd created a shell company called TechFlow Consulting, registered to his brother-in-law in Calgary. He'd been diverting our clients to TechFlow for specialized services that our company supposedly couldn't provide, then splitting the fees through a complex series of transfers. $320,000 in 18 months. Stolen methodically, buried in legitimate-looking consulting expenses. But it got worse. Much worse. Mark had been negotiating with our 3 largest clients, Vancouver City Hall, BC Hydro, and the Port of Vancouver, about transitioning their contracts to a newly formed, more innovative firm. According to the email chains James had recovered from our server, Mark planned to announce his departure along with my retirement, taking these clients worth $4.2 million in annual revenue with him. He was going to hollow out the company from the inside, buy my shares at a deflated price, then watch it collapse while he ran TechFlow with all our best clients and employees. The final document in Patricia's package was a letter from Catherine, written in shaky handwriting 3 days before she passed away. "My darling Robert, if you're reading this, it means Patricia found what I suspected. Mark is not your friend. He never was. He's an opportunist who saw a brilliant, trusting man and decided to exploit him. I've watched him for 15 years, and I've seen the way he looks at you when you're not paying attention. Not with respect, but with calculation. He's been waiting for you to be vulnerable, and my illness gave him the perfect opportunity. I'm so sorry I won't be there to help you fight this, but you don't need me to tell you what to do. You're the most brilliant businessman I've ever known, and yes, I'm including my colleagues from 20 years at Morrison and Associates. You built Accutech from an idea on a napkin into a company worth millions. You did that with integrity, intelligence, and hard work. Don't let him steal it. Don't let him make you doubt yourself. And Robert, my love, after you've dealt with this, promise me something. Live. Actually live. We always said we'd travel to Japan when we retired. See the cherry blossoms in Kyoto. Visit the temples. I won't get to do that with you, but you should still go. You should still paint those watercolors you always talked about. You should still take that cooking class. You're 62, not 92. You have so much life left. Don't waste it grieving for me or fighting people who aren't worthy of your energy. Fight this battle because it's right, then move on to joy. That's what I want for you. All my love, always and forever, Catherine. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I called Patricia Morrison. Patricia, I said when she answered, I need you to arrange a meeting with every shareholder individually, not as a group, one-on-one. Can you do that this week? Absolutely, she replied. What's your play? I'm going to give them the choice. Mark never did. The truth or his lies. Over the next 5 days, I met with each board member privately. I showed them James Wu's forensic report. I showed them the email chains where Mark referred to them as useful idiots who'd vote however he directed. I showed them his plan to gut the company and leave them holding worthless shares while he profited. Jennifer Park cried. Robert, I'm so sorry. He told us you were having a breakdown after Catherine died, that you weren't thinking clearly. He said the buyout was for your own good. David Thornton was furious. That son of a bitch. He played us all. Raj Patel looked physically ill. I voted against you. Oh God, Robert, I'm so sorry. By Friday, I had documented statements from 8 of the 12 board members, confirming they'd been misled and retracting their support for Mark's proposal. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. On Monday morning, I made a phone call to someone I'd never thought I'd speak to again. Gerald Winters, CEO of AccuData Systems, our biggest competitor. Gerald and I had history. We'd worked together at the same firm 30 years ago before I left to start Accutech. He'd tried to buy me out 3 times over the years, and I'd refused every time. Robert Chen, Gerald said when he picked up. To what do I owe the pleasure? Gerald, are you still interested in acquiring Accutech Solutions? Long pause. I'm listening. We met that afternoon at a private club in downtown Vancouver. I laid out everything. Mark's theft, his plan, the board's betrayal. And then I made my offer. I own 51% of Accutech. I'll sell you my shares for $7 each. That values the company at $14 million, which we both know is below market rate for our client base and technology. In return, you agree to retain all current employees except Mark Sullivan, who you'll terminate for cause within 24 hours of the acquisition. Gerald leaned back, studying me. Why not just fire him yourself and keep running the company? Because I'm tired, Gerald. My wife died 8 months ago. I've spent 18 years building this company, and it's been corrupted from the inside by someone I trusted. I want out, I want it done cleanly, and I want Mark to understand exactly what he lost. And you want revenge, Gerald added with a slight smile. I want justice, I corrected. There's a difference. We shook hands. Gerald's lawyers drew up the paperwork by Thursday. The sale would close the following Monday, October 28th, exactly 13 days after Mark's attempted coup. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done since Catherine's funeral. I went to our storage unit and pulled out her boxes of belongings. Among her things, I found the travel brochures for Japan we'd collected over the years. Kyoto in cherry blossom season. The temples of Nara. The hot springs of Hakone. I booked a ticket for April. 3 weeks in Japan, traveling alone but carrying her memory with me. On Monday morning, I arrived at the Accutech office at 7:30. Mark's car was already in the parking garage. He'd been working weekends lately, probably moving more assets to TechFlow before finalizing my forced departure. I took the elevator to the 20th floor. The office was quiet, just a few early arrivals getting coffee in the break room. I walked to my corner office, the one with the harbor view, and began packing my personal items into boxes. Photos of Catherine, my CPA certification, the first check we'd ever received from a client, framed and mounted. At 9, sharp, Mark knocked on my door frame. "Robert, we need to talk." "Come in, Mark. Please, sit down." He settled into the chair across from my desk, confident and relaxed. He thought he'd already won. "I've reviewed your proposal," I began. "And?" He leaned forward slightly. "It's insulting, illegal, and poorly executed, but I'll give you credit for ambition." His expression shifted. "Robert, don't be dramatic. This is business." "You're absolutely right. It is business." I slid a folder across the desk. "That's why I sold the company." He opened the folder slowly. I watched his face as he read the acquisition agreement. Watched the color drain, the jaw clench, the hands start to tremble. "You sold to Winters. Closed this morning at 7. AccuData Systems now owns 51% of Accutech Solutions. Effective immediately, they're implementing new management. You'll be receiving a termination letter for cause within the hour, along with a lawsuit for the $320,000 you stole." He shot to his feet. "You can't do this. I built this company with you." "You worked here," I corrected calmly. "I built it with Catherine. You seem to have forgotten that. You also forgot that every email you've ever sent on company servers is company property, including the ones to your brother-in-law about tech flow, the ones to our clients about transitioning their contracts, and the particularly illuminating ones where you referred to me as a senile old fool who's too broken up about his dead wife to notice what's happening." His face went from pale to purple. "Those were private communications. On company equipment. Our IT policies are very clear, Mark. You signed them yourself." I stood up, matching his height. "You underestimated me because I was grieving. You mistook grief for weakness. Catherine warned me about that. She said predators always attack the wounded." "Catherine," he spat. "That meddling—" "Careful," I interrupted, my voice dropping to ice. "She's not here to defend herself, but I am. And if you finish that sentence, I'll add defamation to the lawsuit." Mark grabbed the folder, crumpling the pages. "This isn't over. I'll fight this. I'll take you to court for wrongful termination, for breach of partnership, for what, Mark? For catching you stealing, for documenting your fraud. Please do take me to court. I'd love to see you explain those emails to a judge." I walked to the door and opened it. "Security will escort you out. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings. Nothing electronic, nothing proprietary. There will be witnesses in your office the entire time." 2 security guards I'd personally briefed that morning appeared in the hallway. "Gentlemen," I said, "please assist Mr. Sullivan in collecting his things." Mark looked at me with pure hatred. "I gave you 15 years, and I gave you a career, a partnership, and a 6-figure salary. You repaid me with theft and betrayal. We're even." He left, flanked by security. I watched him go, feeling nothing but a strange emptiness where anger should have been. The rest of the day was a blur of meetings with Gerald's transition team, brief conversations with employees assuring them their jobs were safe, and one particularly satisfying moment when Jennifer Park hugged me in the hallway and whispered, "Thank God you didn't let him win." By 5 o'clock, Mark's office was cleared out. His nameplate had been removed from the door, his parking spot reassigned. 18 years of partnership erased in 9 hours. I drove home to my empty house in West Vancouver, sat in the kitchen where Catherine's coffee mug still waited in the cupboard, opened my laptop and looked at the bank notification. The sale had transferred $7.14 million to my account, minus legal fees and taxes. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More money than I needed, and absolutely no idea what to do with it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Mark's face when he'd read that acquisition agreement. The shock, the rage, the disbelief. Part of me had expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. At 2 a.m, I got out of bed and went to my home office. Found the letter Catherine had written. Read it again. "After you've dealt with this, promise me something. Live. Actually live." I pulled out my phone and composed an email to Patricia Morrison. Patricia, I need you to set up a charitable foundation. Focus area: supporting widows and widowers with young families who are dealing with terminal illness. Initial funding, $2 million. I'll send details tomorrow. Thank you for everything. Robert. I hit send, then opened a new email to Gerald Winters. Gerald, I want to fund a scholarship program at UBC for mature students returning to school after career disruptions. $1 million over 5 years. Let's discuss implementation this week. Send. The emptiness started to fill with something else. Not happiness exactly, but purpose. Over the next 2 weeks, Mark tried everything. His lawyer sent threatening letters. He filed a wrongful termination suit that was dismissed within 48 hours when we provided the forensic evidence of his theft. He called me directly 17 times. I didn't answer once. His brother-in-law's company, TechFlow, tried to approach our former clients. Vancouver City Hall, BC Hydro, and the Port of Vancouver all declined to even meet with them. Word had spread through the industry about what Mark had attempted, and in Canada's tight-knit business community, reputation is everything. TechFlow dissolved within 6 weeks, unable to secure a single contract. Mark's wife filed for divorce in December. Apparently, she hadn't known about the shell company or the embezzlement, and she wasn't interested in being married to someone facing fraud charges. I learned all of this from Patricia, who tracked the legal proceedings with professional interest. I didn't take any satisfaction from it. I simply noted it as a consequence of Mark's choices. In late November, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Robert, it's Mark. I should have hung up. Instead, I listened. I need to talk to you, he said. His voice sounded different, smaller somehow. Can we meet for coffee? Just 30 minutes, please. Why? Because I owe you an apology. A real one. Face to face. We met at a Tim Hortons near False Creek. Neutral territory, public enough to prevent a scene. Mark was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with an untouched coffee in front of him. He'd aged. In 6 weeks, he'd aged what looked like 5 years. Gray hair I'd never noticed before. Lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. Weight loss that made his suit hang awkwardly. I sat down across from him without ordering anything. Thank you for coming, he began. I didn't respond, just waited. I've been seeing a therapist, he continued. Court mandated, part of the settlement agreement. She's been making me examine why I did what I did. He laughed bitterly. Turns out, I'm a textbook narcissist, with deep-seated insecurity issues stemming from childhood abandonment. Who knew? Mark, what do you want? I want to explain. Not excuse, but explain. He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. When Catherine got sick, I saw an opportunity. That sounds monstrous, and it was. But I'd been watching you build this company for 15 years, and I'd always felt like the junior partner. The guy who came in after the hard work was done. You and Catherine, you built it together. I was just an employee who got lucky enough to buy in. You were a partner, I said quietly. You had 49%. You earned $250,000 a year. You had respect, responsibility, autonomy, but I didn't have control. He met my eyes, and I wanted control more than I wanted integrity. When Catherine died, I convinced myself I was doing you a favor, forcing you into retirement so you could grieve. But that was a lie, I told myself. I wanted you gone because I wanted to be the one in charge, the one who got credit for the success. I absorbed this. You destroyed yourself chasing credit for work you didn't do. I know. He slumped in his chair. I lost everything. My career, my marriage, my reputation. The lawsuit bankrupted me. I'm living in a 1-bedroom in Surrey, working at a call center for $15 an hour. Part of me wanted to feel pity. A larger part of me remembered standing in that boardroom while he called me incompetent in front of people I'd mentored. Why are you telling me this, Mark? Because I need you to know I understand what I did, and I need to ask if there's any possibility of forgiveness. I thought about Catherine's letter, about her instructions to fight the battle, then move on to joy, about not wasting energy on people unworthy of it. I forgive you, I said. His eyes widened. You do? I forgive you because holding on to anger would only hurt me, not you. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. We're not friends, Mark. We're not colleagues. We're not anything to each other anymore. Robert, please. I need a job, a reference, something. I'm 64 years old with a fraud conviction on my record. Nobody will hire me. You made choices, I replied, standing up. Adult choices with adult consequences. I can't help you, and I won't try. But I'll give you one piece of advice. The same advice Catherine gave me. Stop chasing what you lost and start building something new. It's the only way forward. I left him sitting there with his cold coffee and his regrets. That December, I celebrated my first Christmas without Catherine. It was brutally hard. The empty chair at dinner, the presents I'd bought for her before she got sick, still wrapped in the closet, the silence in a house that used to be full of her laugh. But I'd also started painting. Terrible watercolors of English Bay, all wrong perspectives and muddy colors. I joined a grief support group at the community center, where I met other widows and widowers navigating the same dark waters. I'd started planning the Japan trip in detail, researching hotels, mapping out temples, learning basic phrases, and I'd established the Catherine Chen Memorial Foundation, which had already provided support to 12 families dealing with terminal illness, helping with bills, childcare, meal delivery, the small, practical things that made impossible days slightly more bearable. In February of 2025, I sold our house in West Vancouver. Too many memories, too much space for one person. I bought a smaller apartment in Yaletown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the seawall. Modern, minimalist, completely different from the home Catherine and I had shared. It felt like betrayal at first. Then it felt like survival. Finally, it felt like choice. On April 1st, I flew to Tokyo. 3 weeks of temples and gardens, sushi and sake, hot springs and train rides through the countryside. I carried Catherine's photograph in my wallet and talked to her sometimes in the quiet moments. I cried at the cherry blossoms in Kyoto because they were as beautiful as she'd always said they'd be, and she wasn't there to see them. But I also laughed with strangers in a tiny ramen shop in Osaka. I painted clumsy watercolors of Mount Fuji that a kind, elderly Japanese woman praised despite their obvious amateurism. I hiked trails I would have been too cautious to try when Catherine was alive, driven by a new understanding that life is desperately short. I came home different. Not happy, exactly, but at peace. Mark never contacted me again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to Edmonton, started over in a different field, was slowly rebuilding a quieter life. I genuinely hoped he found some measure of peace too, even though our paths would never cross again. AccuData Systems thrived with the Accutech acquisition. Gerald kept his promise, retaining every employee except Mark. The company's value doubled within a year. Several of my former staff members sent thank you notes, telling me the transition had actually improved working conditions, brought in new resources, opened new opportunities. It was the best possible outcome from a painful situation. Today, I'm 63. I volunteer with the Catherine Chen Memorial Foundation, mentor young entrepreneurs through a small business program, and paint terrible watercolors that I occasionally sell at local markets for charity. I'm dating someone, a widow named Margaret, who I met at the grief support group. We're taking it slowly, two people who've learned that love is precious and fragile and worth the risk anyway. I think about Mark sometimes. Not with anger anymore, but with a kind of sad curiosity about how differently things could have gone if he'd chosen integrity over ambition. If he'd been content being a partner instead of chasing sole ownership of something that wasn't his to take. The business world moves fast. People have mostly forgotten about the scandal, but I haven't forgotten the lessons. Trust, yes, but verify. Grieve, yes, but live. Fight when you must, then let go and move forward. Catherine was right about everything. She usually was. Fighting Mark was necessary, but it wasn't the point of my life. The point was what came after. The choosing to live fully in the time I have left. The refusing to let betrayal make me bitter or grief make me static. I'm not the same man I was that day in the boardroom. I'm harder in some ways, softer in others. I've learned that dignity isn't about never falling, but about how you stand back up. I've learned that 62 isn't an ending, but a different kind of beginning. And I've learned that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building a life so full and meaningful that the person who tried to tear you down becomes irrelevant to your story. That's the real victory. Not that Mark lost everything, but that I gained myself back. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to Shattered Vengeance. We share true stories of resilience and recovery every week. Tell us in the comments what part of this story hit home for you and what city or province you're watching from. Thank you for listening.